Hello everybody, it's your boy Soblis back with another one. Once more, Happy New Year's. And with a new year, we will be getting a new background and new theming for the channel. So I really do hope you guys enjoy the new background for this year, and I hope to use it a lot more than I used this one. And personally, I think this background is one of my best, but hope you guys enjoy the new one, and here it is. Pokemon Go is nearing its 10th year of existence, and in those 10 years, we've gotten 7 Pokeballs. Yeah, that's not a large number. For the longest time, I remembered Pokemon Go only having the Pokeball, Great Ball, and Ultra Ball. That's it. But for the past few years, we've pretty much been getting a new Pokeball every single year, not counting 2025, as it's the year that shockingly breaks the trend of a new Pokeball. During 2022, we got the Beast Ball alongside the Ultra Beast. During 2023, we got one of the most anticipated Pokeballs, being the Master Ball. And during 2024, alongside the Wild Area event, we got the Safari Ball, appearing in the Pokemon Go game for the first time. And these were insane releases. Despite it being a yearly trend by that point, a new Pokeball is always something interesting in Pokemon Go, which is why in today's video, we'll be going over every Pokeball that has yet to be released in Pokemon Go and how they can be released into this game. Not to mention that a lot of these Pokeballs don't seem like they translate well into this game, so yes, I will be going over how I think they would function in the game of Pokemon Go, and I think a few of the ideas that I ended up coming up with are pretty unique. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into the first Pokeball, which is going to be... So first up is the level ball. The level ball's catch rate changes based off the level of the Pokemon. More or less, if the Pokemon that you're using is a lower level than the Pokemon that you're trying to catch, the level ball is going to be less effective. But if you are using a Pokemon, let's say that's level 100 against a level 70 Pokemon, your odds of catching that Pokemon will increase. And I wanted to kind of replicate this in Pokemon Go. So I believe that this would release in the event that I feel like would introduce the idea of new Pokeballs being introduced, being the Abercorn event or something. Technically, it would just be an event where if you spun Pokestops, there would be like 3 special Pokeballs. I'll go over the other ones later, but there will be 3 special Pokeballs that you can get from those Pokestops, and you could use them, and that's how the event would be. There would be no special wild spawns or anything. It would just be when you spin Pokestops, you get a level ball and 2 other kinds of Pokeballs that, like I said, I will go over later, but we're going to call it the Abercorn event for now. But technically how this ball would work is your buddy Pokemon. If you are trying to catch a Pokemon that has a lower CP than your buddy Pokemon, then the catch rate on this ball will be higher. But if your buddy Pokemon has a lower CP than the Pokemon that you're trying to catch, then the catch rate on this Pokeball will be worse, meaning that you probably want to put your highest CP Pokemon as your buddy Pokemon to maximize how this Pokeball can catch Pokemon. But yeah, without further ado, let's get into the next one. Now we move on to the Lure Ball, which is a Pokeball that gets better at catching Pokemon that you find by fishing. So in the main series games, you're able to fish, but in Pokemon Go, you're not able to fish. So in the main series games, if you found like a shiny Magikarp via fishing, you'd use a Lure Ball to increase your odds of catching it, but we don't have the fishing feature in Pokemon Go. So I'm just gonna change it so like any fish Pokemon and stuff like just gets an increase. So it's gonna be like very subjective, like Feebas is a fish, Magikarp is a fish, any Pokemon like that, like Beerscuda, whenever that thing gets added. I don't even know if I pronounced that correctly, but yeah, that Pokemon, Veluza, yeah, like those Pokemon will just get an increase. And for events, I don't know when it would get released. I think it would be released in its own kind of event where like a bunch of fish Pokemon are in the wild spawning with boosted shiny odds. And maybe Chi-Yu would get released during that event, but that's pretty much it. So the Moon Ball works better on Pokemon that require a Moonstone to evolve, but I want to kind of change this since very few Pokemon require a Moonstone to evolve, and not to mention, I want this Pokeball to be more useful in Pokemon Go. And since instead of using a Moonstone, usually the Pokemon that would use a Moonstone to evolve just need to evolve during the night. So I'm going to make it so that the Moon Ball in this game makes it easier to catch Pokemon that evolve during the nighttime. And it would be released during an event which has a bunch of these nighttime Pokemon spawning. So how the friend ball works in Pokemon is when you catch a Pokemon, its friendship level goes up immediately. And I feel like we should easily be able to translate this into Pokemon Go. So I'll make it so that as soon as you catch a Pokemon using a friend ball, it does have the same catch rate as a normal Pokeball, but it will immediately be excited when you put it as your buddy if it is caught in a friend ball. But that only works once. And it has a 30-day limit, meaning after 30 days of catching a Pokemon in a friend ball, you will, be able to put it as your buddy and it will be excited. So you could catch like a legendary or a special Pokemon to you in a friend ball and get a head start on the buddy journey. Next up, we have the Love Ball. In the main series games, the Love Ball works better if the Pokemon that you're using is the opposite gender of the Pokemon that you're trying to catch. So I would make it kind of similar. Your buddy's gender would technically determine in Pokemon Go how this ball is used. I would expect it to be released in a Valentine's Day event, and I meant to mention this during the friend ball section, but I would expect the same to be done for the friend ball. I would want these two Pokeballs to be released together though, instead of being released in separate Valentine's Day events. They would always be released in Valentine's Day events together, and after the Valentine's Day events end, they're no longer obtainable. But technically how the Love Ball would work in Pokemon Go is if your buddy is a male and the Pokemon that you were trying to catch is a female, then the Love Ball will have a higher chance of catching that Pokemon. But if your Pokemon is a female and the Pokemon that you're trying to catch is a male, then it would have a higher chance of catching that Pokemon. And otherwise, if your Pokemon buddy is a female and the Pokemon you're trying to catch is a female, the ball will just work like a Pokeball and stuff. So yeah. Okay then, let's get on to the Heavy Ball. In the main series games, the Heavy Ball makes it way easier to catch heavier Pokemon. The heavier your Pokemon is, the easier it is to catch. This is going to be really different in Pokemon Go. So technically, the Heavy Ball is only going to work on Pokemon that your game registered as an XXL, meaning the heaviest Pokemon of that class that you've caught and stuff. So when it's registered as an XXL, the Heavy Ball will increase in catch rate. And I would like this to be released during a Steel event, similar to the, Steel events we've gotten recently in Pokemon Go, like the Ultra Unlock, the event that we got last 2024 and stuff. That one would be a good event to release it in. But I will show the events that I feel like this would fit a release in for. But it would definitely be released in a Steel type event with an increased chance of XXL Pokemon appearing. But yeah, that's how I think it would work in Pokemon Go. Okay, the fastball. This is going to be a really tough one, but it's going to be one where I'm going to go on a kind of a rant. So how the fastball works in games normally is it technically has a higher catch rate on Pokemon that flee a lot. Mainly they were used in Gen 2, I'm pretty sure, for Suicune and Raikou, which, makes sense. So yeah, how I would expect these Pokeballs to work is I would expect this Pokeball to work like during tour events. It would kind of be like the Safari Ball for tour events. But for this to work, we'd need to bring back roaming Pokemon during tour events. Meaning that I would want these tour events to feature roaming Pokemon, kind of like how the tour event for 2022 featured Suicune, Entei, and Raikou. 2023 featured Latios and Latias. 2024's Hoenn Tour featured the Lake Trio. But then 2025 just cut that off. We just stopped getting roaming Pokemon. And I feel like for tour events, we need to bring those back. But if we do bring them back, it would be cool if during these tour events, every single hour, similar to the Wild Area event, we would get 15 fastballs. And we'd have to use those fastballs to increase our chance of catching these roaming Pokemon. I have no idea why I even put this on here. We're skipping the Sport Ball and moving on to the Repeat Ball. pretty self-explanatory. In the games, this ball works as a kind of like repeat, rinse and repeat, like makes your chances better. If you already have the Pokemon registered in your decks, its chances of getting caught get increased when you use the repeat ball on it. And it would technically work the same in Pokemon Go. And I would release it in a Pokedex event focused around completing a Pokedex. So this event would probably have multiple research tasks making you catch multiples of different Pokemon and Pokemon types. But honestly, not gonna lie to you, the repeat ball would work pretty much the same in Pokemon Go. In Pokemon Go, if you have the Pokemon registered to your Pokedex and you use a repeat ball on it, your chances of catching that Pokemon are immediately increased. And the repeat ball would have the same catch rate as a great ball with its whole, boost applied. So it wouldn't really be the best Pokeball, but it still would be pretty solid if you're catching multitudes of Pokemon. But moving on. Okay, time for me to put my thinking cap on for this one. So the timer ball. The timer ball is technically the opposite of the quick ball, as the more turns that go by while you're trying to catch a Pokemon, the stronger it gets when it comes towards catching that Pokemon. But I have no idea how I would implement this in Pokemon Go. I do know I would release it in a time event, specifically a adamant time event or an adamant space event. We'll talk about the adamant space event later, but the adamant time event would technically be the event where I would release the timer ball. And this timer ball would be used to, just catch Pokemon that have broken out multiple times. So the more Pokemon breaks out of a normal Pokeball, the easier it gets to catch with a timer ball, is what I'm trying to say. Personally, I feel like there would probably be a better way to implement this Pokeball into Pokemon Go, but I thought about it longer and I just realized that it would be so much easier if this is just how it worked. Okay, then so now we have the Nest Ball. The Nest Ball becomes better technically the lower your target's level is than the Pokemon that you're using against it while trying to catch it. Very obvious. If your buddy's CP is higher than the Pokemon that you're trying to catch, this Pokeball has an increased chance of catching. But I wouldn't make it too high because this criteria is way too easy to meet. Because you can just put your buddy as like your highest CP Pokemon, and then I guarantee you almost everything, if not everything you encounter, will indeed be a lower CP than that Pokemon. For Zora, it wouldn't count its actual CP when you catch it. It would count its CP when you encounter it. So the CP that you see when you encounter is the CP being used to determine if this Pokeball has a higher catch rate or not. Its catch rate would really just go to like a Great Ball's catch rate. I wouldn't want this to be too overpowered, like I said, because this criteria is extremely easy to meet. And I would also have it be released in like a catch-based event, mainly focused around like catching Pokemon and like powering them up after you catch them. And the Pokemon would be higher CP. So during this event, I would have a bonus be like Pokemon that you encounter are always higher CP. And their IVs would also be floored at 10-10-10 through wild encounters. But this event would last no longer than 3 days. Moving on from the Nest Ball to the Net Ball. The Net Ball in the games technically works better with bugging water-type Pokemon. It would be the same way. I would have this be an event featuring, it would probably be released during the Bug Out event or a Water Festival event. But if so, I would make it so that the event would pretty much only feature like bug and water-type Pokemon and stuff. And it would also feature the release of Mega Golisopod. Yet another Pokeball that I'm pretty sure a lot of you have been anticipating is the Dive Ball. The Dive Ball works in the main series game as a way to increase your chances of catching a Pokemon underwater. But unfortunately in Pokemon Go, it is impossible to go underwater. So how I would have the Dive Ball work is it would increase your chances of catching water-type Pokemon. But unlike the Nest Ball, it would instead increase the odds to work like a Great Ball. So when you use the Dive Ball on water-type Pokemon, it acts sort of like a Great Ball, but for water-type Pokemon. I also believe that this Pokeball would be released in a Water Festival event if it was actually in the game, because the Dive Ball, water-type Pokemon, it just makes sense. I had to reread this Pokeball's description a few times because it just didn't sound like anything that wasn't the Love Ball, but ultimately the Luxury Ball makes it so that Pokemon caught in the Pokeball are more friendly after being caught. So I think this would also be released during a Valentine's Day event, but instead of being like the other annual Pokeballs, it would be released during a Valentine's Day event and then it would be featured in other events. And how it would work is that it would just be a Pokeball that makes Pokemon way easier to get friendship levels on. I don't know. I think that how this would work is technically as soon as you catch this ball, it would double the amount of hearts you get even when your buddy is excited. So catching a Pokemon in a luxury ball would technically be like catching it in a love ball, but way better. Or is it a friend ball? Is the friend ball the one I gave that effect to? Okay, the heal ball. So during the games, it regularly heals a Pokemon after you've caught it. So if you guys had a very rigorous battle and you catch it in a heal ball, it will usually heal the Pokemon. So how I would have this work in Pokemon Go, bear with me, is I would make it so that when you catch a Pokemon in a heal ball, it will have the ability to technically use the heal ball as a super potion. So technically every single time the Pokemon gets like damage, you can use the heal ball as a super potion. But it does function like a Pokeball, so it is really hard to catch a Pokemon in a heal ball. But in Pokemon Go, it would function like a super potion. So like whenever you need to heal your Pokemon, you can use that heal ball that it was caught in to heal 50 HP from it immediately. And then after that, you can just like use like lower potions and stuff. But it technically makes it so that you have infinite heals on that one Pokemon, even though it is just 50. If it is a low HP Pokemon, it's pretty much going to be amazing. And you would be able to get these very early game. And I would also have these released during a kind of Valentine's Day event. But after that, it would be re-released in other events that make sense for it to be re-released in. I know a lot of you suckers have been waiting for me to cover this Pokeball, but the Quick Ball. The Quick Ball technically makes it easier to catch Pokemon the sooner you use it, and it's pretty obvious how this thing would work. The less Pokeballs that a Pokemon has had thrown at it until you throw in the Quick Ball, the easier it is to catch the Pokemon. So let's say the Quick Ball is the first Pokeball you use. It kind of functions like a Great Ball. Yes, a Great Ball, because I don't want this thing to be extremely overpowered. And yes, I would have this thing released in a raid event, and after that event ends, you would no longer be able to use them. The Quick Ball would only come around every once in a while, and it would be released during the Adamant Space event, where the Timer Ball and the Quick Ball would be released in tandem with each other, as these events would start pretty much immediately after each other and last a week individually. I do not know when they would be placed, but they sound like January events, so I think I would have them function during like a January. Maybe like January 2028, I would have these events take place. So, the Dust Ball. I would release this during a nighttime event because in the main series games, it works better during the nighttime, and that is exactly how it's going to work in Pokemon Go. Now, you may be going like, what about how it works better in dark places? I mean, unless they give a Pokemon an adventure effect purely used to make sure that you can use this Pokeball during the daytime, I am so sorry with you. That's not how this is going to work. But I guess you could use Moongeist Beam, and if you have Moongeist Beam active, you can also use this Pokeball as an Ultra Ball. But yeah, after this Pokeball's release, it's going to be one of the very few Pokeballs where you can actually spin them from Pokestops, but you'd have to collect it in your Pokeball decks, which I will get into later on how I plan on adding all these Pokeballs to the game unanimously. Okay then, so the Cherished Dream and Park Balls would just straight up not be in the game. Unfortunately, I do not see these Pokeballs being useful, or at least being able to get transferred into Pokemon Go in a way that makes sense. I mean, they would probably be special event Pokeballs that you could get from winning events or like tournaments, but otherwise, I don't see these being usable. But besides that, how would I, give people an incentive to get these Pokeballs, even the ones that are pretty bad, like the Heal Ball? Easy. I would make a Pokeball Dex, and when you complete the Pokeball Dex, you would get a special reward, like a sticker to put on your Pokeballs, or a special pose to show somebody that you've collected every single Pokeball. And hell, maybe we can have the Cherish Park and Dream Ball be there as like special Pokeballs that are like way harder to collect, that make the badge or whatever the hell you get from completing your Pokeball Dex actually, pretty cool to show off. But yeah, with that, it's going to be your boy Sabless signing out. Deuces.